Honest, we're going live. There we go. Ask the Podcast Coach for September 24th, 2022.
Let's get ready to podcast.
There it is. It's that music that means it's Saturday morning. It's time for Ask the Podcast Coach, where you get your podcast questions answered live. I'm Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting.com, and joining me right over there, the one and only Jim Collison from TheAverageGuy.tv. Jim, how's it going, buddy?
Greetings, Dave. Happy Saturday morning to you. A little different environment this morning. I'm back on campus at Gallup where we've got a program going on, and so I've got some students learning some software development fundamentals. And so I'm in the studio, which I haven't done a lot of studio. It's been a while since we've done this.
Well, what's interesting is you have a Gallup on your shirt, and then the blackboard. Is that a blackboard behind you?
No, it's just one of those background, that we've these big sheets of whatever.
Because it has Gallup as well. So for a second, it almost looked like you were in the wall. Like somehow you were.
Yeah, the words continue. Ooh, it does line up perfectly.
Like Jim is invisible. Somehow he's been trapped in a wall.
It's a green screen. I kind of wish now I'd made him do green screen, but this is what we want. This printed, we can change it any time we want.
Oh, nice.
Deal. So yeah, nice little background. Good to be. The big thanks to Gallup for letting me do this. Hobby. Work. This is not technically Gallup work. I wouldn't necessarily, but since I was in the office, they let me do this. So thanks to Gallup for doing that.
Very cool. Now you don't have your coffee with you.
Well,
look at me. I'm getting all out of sync already. See, it's throwing me.
I know. No. I know. Hey, we'll pretend.
We'll do the pour.
We'll pretend.
There we go.
Because you can't miss the sound.
And of course, that invisible coffee pour is brought to you by Mark over at podcastbranding.co. If you need something to look great, so let's say you need artwork for your podcast, perfect. He's got it handled. What if you want, a lead magnet? Perfect. What if you look at your website? I was at a website last night that was absolutely horrendous. I believe it was soundslikeacult.com that I was just like, ooh. Now, on one hand, they have a website. We're going to talk about websites here in a bit. But Mark could easily help them a lot. And so the great thing about it is Mark is a podcaster, so that's always helpful. You don't have to explain that it's like a radio thing, but it's the internet. Nope, Mark gets it. And he's also an award-winning graphic artist. So he's going to sit down with you one-on-one to figure out what kind of brand, what kind of image you want to portray to your audience. And the beautiful thing is he's going to make you look great because remember, they see you way before they hear you. So check him out, podcastbranding.co. Tell him Dave and Jim sent you.
I still have coffee. Big thanks to Dan Lefebvre over there, based on a true story podcast.com. If you're looking for something interesting, if you want to know a movie based on a true story is actually based on the true story, he's got over 200 episodes over there. Based on a true story podcast.com. Dan, thanks for your sponsorship. I swung by Starbucks this morning and got a venti cup of coffee and then poured it into the mug because I knew I had to have the mug. I can't do a podcast without the mug. So
that's right.
Poured it in. I'm good. They don't make coffee here on the weekends, and I can't brew any here. So I was kind of stuck. I guess I could have maybe gotten like a Panera box, something like that. But we got it done one way or another. We got it done.
People will be amazed when I say this. I've never. The only thing I've had is the one that's chocolate and coffee, a mocha, frappuccino. No,
sure, yeah. Well, they make mocha frappuccinos.
Yeah, but I've never actually ordered anything from Starbucks. I walk in, I look for the chocolate milk that is somehow coffee. I grab that pre-made mug, and that's it. So
yeah. No, coffee's not for everybody, and I don't encourage people to get addicted to it.
Well, we're going to talk a little websites this morning,
right?
Because first of all, Apple is saying, "Hey, make sure you have a website in your whatever your media host is." So if it's Libsyn, Captivate, Buzzsprout, etc. And one of the things that we're going to tie some things together because a lot of times people don't know that when you sign up for most of these accounts, they give you a website. So that's already there because your media host doesn't know what your website is. So first of all, if the goal is to drive traffic to your website, put your website in your media host, because I'm amazed at how many people do that. But the other thing I want to tie this into is I get this question a lot, and that is, hey, I submitted my show to insert directory here, Apple, Spotify, whatever, and I can't find it. And at Libsyn, when you submit your show to Spotify, we get your direct link. We can, even though you're not in it, we get a direct link because you're not showing up in search. So this person really should have been coming up in search. And I was like, well, that's weird because I have a link to their show on Spotify. So I reached out to Spotify. Now, I'm mentioning Spotify here. This could have easily been Apple or any other directory, but here's what they said. If you're unable to see your show or episode in search results, and you can visit the show episode via an open link, meaning the one I got, on the client, meaning, in this case, Spotify, it may be due to the lack of data or analytics required to bring your listing to the top of the search results. So think about this. There's like 4 million podcasts. They can't show 4 million in the results. So they're only showing those that match. This is usually the case for new content in indexing, as there can be a lot of results populated within the search on the client, blah, blah, blah. So I'm going to just translate that. On one hand, you're not showing up in the results because you don't have enough followers. And of course, you're going to say, yeah, but how can I get followers if I'm not coming up in the search? And this is where your website really comes into play. And that is put a link to Apple and Spotify and Google and Amazon on your website. Now, why should you do that? Because number one, it reinforces your brand. So instead of saying, go to, find me wherever fine podcasts are sold, you go, no, go to schoolofpodcasting.com/follow, and that will take you there. So it reinforces your brand. You eliminate your audience having to find you, because I do a show called the Podcast Rodeo Show. It doesn't come up because it has the word podcast and show in it. So the only thing I'm going to rank for is rodeo. And you got to, in some cases, in some apps, you have to search for Dave Jackson for that to come up. Hence, horrible name for that show. And then the third one is, if your audience is telling their friends about it and they go, oh, here's a link, and they put a link on their website or their blog or whatever, that might boost your SEO. So just a couple reasons why you need your own website, and make it easy to remember, like the averageguy.tv, right? Instead of, it's Jim free service dot slash. Do
you think askthepodcastcoach.com is too long? Like, we didn't start this show to necessarily optimize SEO, right?
Yeah.
But let's do some self-evaluation on that. If you were to give some advice to someone else who had askthepodcastcoach.com, is that too long?
The only thing, this is why I would give myself a pass, is all those words are easy to spell. That's the only reason I would go. But it's a mouthful. We got the in there,
It makes sense, though. We're teaching people to create passwords with long phrases, right? And you use, so to say askthepodcastcoach.com, it's the name of the show. I think it could get a little confusing if we had, say the name of the show is Ask the Podcast Coach, but we got askthecoach.com.
Right.
Like, then I think, because oh, well, it's shorter. Yeah, but it's not the brand, right? I think this is one of those situations where maybe longer is better than shorter because it sticks to the brand. And we say Ask the Podcast Coach all the time. So I think it can work. And they're not words that are hard to spell either, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
well, the other thing I always hate to see is people go, oh, just go to atpc.com, which I don't own. But then you're like, wait, what was that again? ATBC? No, ATP. Right. P is in podcast. And it's like,
Ask the Podcast Coach. And you're like, why didn't you just say askthepodcastcoach.com?
Yeah.
Right. So, I agree.
And then I had somebody else that they thought, which I guess, hey, if I got a website from my media host, I have to use that. Like, that's why you gave it to me. And I'm like, no, we give it to you because you might not have your own website. And their goal was to drive traffic to their website. And every episode was directing back to the media host. And I was like, no, if the goal is to drive traffic to your website, number one, you can delete the one from your media host. Now that's up for debate because some people are like, well, on one hand, if I have two websites promoting my podcast, then I've got, two irons in the fire promoting me. And I'm like, yeah, I guess as long as you got your call to action in your show description or on that website. So for me, I always say a podcast is just think of it like a blog post with a player in it, but behind the scenes, you've got that whole syndication thing. And then, just put your show description on your website. And I also see this a lot where people will take, all the different media hosts have a way where you can get just like a big giant box of like 5 episodes and you just stick it on your website and it updates automatically. You get absolutely zero SEO for that because behind the scenes, that's not even on your website. It's on on the media host. Yeah. So write up your description on your website. That'll help you get some traffic, and then just smack your player in there and you're good to go. And then I always love, having a link there on your website to, make it easy to get to. So something like I'm sure I asked the podcastcoach.com/follow. I'm going to guess I probably have set up something so that you don't have to go even just saying, fine, it's on my website. No, make it super easy to find you on your website by going, it's, ask the podcastcoach.com/subscribe or /follow or whatever we had. We had Sergeant Fred for a second. He popped in and popped out. So, so you can use both websites. Just realize that by default, and Mark did I get the links wrong? But it's the one and only, and are you in Florida? No, he's in the car.
Or he's flying, one of the two. He could be, that could be a Cessna he's in right now.
Hey guys.
Mark,
Happy
how are
Saturday
you?
morning to you. Good. I'm calling in today, not as Mark from podcastbranding.co.
Okay.
I'm not calling in as Mark from resourcefuldesigner.com, although I would like to say that I just recently published episode 300, and on September 30th, I'm celebrating 7 years of that podcast.
Yep. No, where's my applause button? I had one, dog. Here it is. There we go. Too many orange buttons.
There you go. Now, I want to call in as Mark from Solo Talk Media today and talk to you about podcast monetization.
Okay.
To the man who wrote the book on it. I launched Solo Talk Media. That's how I got into podcasting. I launched it in 2013. For those who don't know, it's a network that I created with one show to begin, and I do TV fan show podcasts. Okay. Ever since I started that, I had a website, and on the website, I had a support page with, I've only done PayPal donation button, and they can either do a one-time donation or a monthly donation. In the 9 years that I've been doing podcasts with Solo Talk Media, I've made probably somewhere between $800 and $900 over a course of 9 years with people sending one-time donation. I had a few people that did like $5 monthly for a year and that sort of stuff. Now, during all that time, my call to action was always that, something along the lines of, if you're enjoying what I'm doing, this podcast, I put a lot of effort into it. If you don't know that, I do this podcast during the TV show season, which may only be 10 weeks, but I still have to pay for this podcast and pay for website hosting and all that beyond this for the rest of the year. And if you would like to help offset some of those costs and support the show, then you could visit solotalkmedia.com/support. So it was always something along the way. Help me pay for the podcast while the podcast is not running. And as I said, I've gotten between $800 and $900 over the course of 9 years. Then a couple of weeks ago or a month or so ago, I heard somebody, and for all I know, Dave, this might have come from you because I really don't remember where I heard it. Somebody said that you should not ask people to support the show. You should instead ask them to give back. So when I recently, 4 weeks ago, I launched a new show, the Rings of Power podcast, Tales from Middle-earth, which is about the Amazon TV show, The Rings of Power. And I launched that 4 weeks ago, and I changed my call to action to simply be, Solo Talk Media is a listener-supported community. If you find value in what you're listening, if this podcast is entertaining you, if you like what I do and you would like to give back, visit solotalkmedia.com/support. So that's my call to action now. In 4 weeks, I've received $425 in support. So I I stopped asking them to support the show and help me, like, financially cover the show, to just, if you like what I'm doing and you want to give back to me. And I've got half the amount that I collected in 9 years in 4 weeks. Now, with some context, I'm getting, in those 4 weeks, I'm getting about 1,000 downloads per episode, because my previous podcast, a lot of people followed me over, and I was getting a lot, like some of those podcasts, I was getting close to 10,000 downloads per episode. So I have, so far right now, I'm about the 1,000 per episode mark, to give you some context with that. But I thought I'd share that just changing my call to action to, if you'd like to give back, as opposed to support the show.
I think there's two things that help that work. One is, if you're getting value from this, so it makes them kind of reflect, like, hey, this was cool. This was a cool podcast. Can you give some of that back? I think for me, the difference between the two, and depending on how you do it, and I'm not saying you did this, but I've heard people give the other kind of approach, like, hey, this is expensive and I'm working hard, and you sound a little bit like there's a potential there to sound like a whiner, which you're not. Yeah. But you're kind of like, hey, I'm working hard and I'm not making any money and you should be helping me, where the other one is more like, hey, if you like this show and you're getting value from it, how about giving some of that back? I don't know. What do you think, Jim? You look deep in thought.
Yeah, no, Mark. So are you saying just that term support the show isn't as effective as asking them to give back? Is that the fundamental switch?
Well, and I wish I could remember where I heard that from, but I don't know if I read it or if I heard it on a podcast, but somebody said that just psychologically, people are more inclined to give back to something they like than to support something. Support has some other connotations to it, where just giving back, people are saying, like, yeah, I like what Mark's doing. I'll give back to him. Here's $25. Here's $10. Here's $5.
My guess is you heard that from Jen Briney, because I know if you want to see Mark's work, congressionaldish.com. Maybe not.
Well, I honestly, I don't listen to Jen because I'm Canadian.
Yes, sure. That's a good point.
So she is one of my clients.
Wait a minute. U.S. politics aren't appropriate in Canada? What the? Come on, Mark. I thought they were good everywhere.
I love Jen to death. Yeah. She's a great person, all that, but I don't listen to her show.
Yeah. Daniel says that it's a gift versus donate study was on nonprofits, but they didn't study other words like give or support. There was Daniel had a Twitter thread about it. So there you go.
It might have been from Daniel. I heard it then. So.
Mark, last week, I didn't do a show this week, but last week at the end of the show, I did an extended call out for our Patreon, for my Patreon account. And a listener who had been part of the show for, 6 months, it kind of toned it down a little bit and was just like, if you want to, and I use the word support. So I may take you up on this and say, if you want to give back, see what that does to the audience, because I can flip that switch, just right away and do it. But we just did an extended call out to it, and immediately I got somebody signed up for Patreon right there at the end of the show, and it was just because I maybe gave it a little more time too, or maybe because I emphasized it. I don't know. I think that's one of those things. Sometimes it's hard to study, but definitely talk longer about it. And I think he just thought, well, it's time I do this. I've been listening for a while. So I like your thinking on this, and I'm going to test it. I'm going to go into my script and change support to give back. Yeah. Just see what it does.
Yeah. The other thing I just want to mention is I mentioned it at the beginning of the show. So I basically start off saying, welcome, I'm your host, Mark Ducote. Before I go anywhere else, just want to remind you that Solo Talk Media is a listener supported community. So I start off the show with that, and it's very, very quickly said. And then as I'm ending the show, I basically say, thank you very much. That's all we have for this week. Before I go, I just want to remind you one more time that Solo Talk Media is a listener-supported show. So I'm reminding people at the end of the episode as well.
Right.
So,
and I do a same as you. I mentioned at the beginning, big thanks to our Patreon supporters, and I'm using that word support in that. And then at the end, we say, if you want to support the show, you can head over to theaverageguy.tv/Patreon.
Yeah. And I know that a lot of people say, like, the end of the show, many people drop off there, but I've got the type of podcast that most people, like, if I look at the consumption rates, most people watch or listen right through to the end, just for the nature of the podcast. So I'm lucky in that aspect.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So
Dan says this sounds like the Value for Value initiative. Kind of. Yeah.
Exactly.
Same wording. Yeah.
Yeah.
So-
So I just want to say,
Yeah.
the difference of, making $800 in 9 years as opposed to making $425 in 4 weeks.
Yeah.
I'm going to keep going with it.
Yeah.
So-
Yeah. Keep us posted on that, Mark. I'd love to see if that, because at that run rate in another month, you should have matched your 8-year total. And then
Well,
it'll be interesting to see, like, does that continue? Does that change does that change it for your audience? And knowing those are all things are specific to the audience,
Yeah.
maybe that's just that the group of people who listen to that TV show, it just resonates with them. Do you have any demographic? Do you get any demographic on that? Do you know?
I don't, but I can
Okay.
tell you that a lot of the donations, like not everyone put a message in with their donation, but some that did have said that, I've been a long time listener. I've listened to your previous podcasts and, I've decided that now it's time. I'd like to give back to you. So most of the ones who left a message had something along that line. It's like, I listened to the Expanse podcast, or I listened to your Killjoys podcast, or your Orphan Black podcast. And I've always, liked what you did, and, here's a little bit to help you. So along those lines. So it's not like it's a brand new show and all of a sudden people are like, oh, I'm loving this show. A lot of it is what I've built up over, 9 years of podcasting here.
Mm-hmm. Coach Dave asks you a question, Mark, in this. He says, I wonder how much of Mark's delivery and energy level with the new message makes up some of that difference. Do you feel like you delivered that differently, changing it from support to
I don't know. The thing is when I used to ask for the support, it would go a lot longer because I would explain that, I have to pay for the podcast hosting, I have to pay for website. So there was a lot more. Now it's just, if you like what I'm doing, if you're getting value, if you're being entertained and you want to give back, here's the link.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's
Yeah.
it. It's,
Yeah.
20 seconds, if that.
Yeah. That's a good way of saying it. I'm gonna rip that off. Thanks.
By all means.
I'll practice that because I think it's a good way to say it. And it's less begging. Dave, you said it here just a second ago. It's less begging and more, and you're not trying to guilt people into it. Hey, they know this is expensive. We don't need to tell them that anymore.
Yeah.
I think, hey, if you've gotten value out of this, we got a way for you to give back.
There you go. We're going to bring up Chris Nessie, who wants to, from House of Ed Tech, who's wanted to jump in on this
Can you stay on, Mark?
conversation.
Can you stay on for a little bit? Or you got to go?
I've got just another 2-3 minutes, and then that's it.
Okay.
Stay on and then drop when you need to.
Okay.
Hey,
Chris.
what's going on, guys? Happy Saturday.
Yeah.
Happy Saturday.
This is great.
First, my new thing is I'm only allowed to watch this program live if I'm out here in the garage riding the bike. So
Yes.
I'm learning
Excellent.
and getting smaller.
Good. Good motivation.
Nice.
Good motivation.
Yes. So I heard what Mark was saying, and I just sort of want to echo a lot of that, my show is geared towards teachers, and teachers aren't always willing to spend their hard-earned dollars on things like a podcast that they enjoy. But I've also started framing it, I'd say within the last year, using Patreon as, if you're getting value from what I'm doing, because it takes me time to find the guests, do what I do in my show. If you're getting value and you'd like to be a financial supporter, here's how you can do it. And, I talk about it at the end because I feel like I heard somewhere, Dave, say, don't ask for money up front because you haven't given them any value yet, especially if you're getting, new listeners. So my approach is I wait till the end and I mention, and Dave, I steal, and I also use the term awesome supporter. And, I just mentioned that it's powered through Patreon. And, if you want to give back, here's how you can do it. And I shout out all of my awesome supporters, which again, I learned from a wise podcaster. And what I did here at the end of the summer going into the new school year was I said, still going with that if you're getting value. And then I said, if you become an awesome supporter by September 1st, I'll put together a little, podcast swag pack, stickers, sweatshirt, mug, whatever, and send you a little swag pack. So I was able to get a couple of new awesome supporters who now will hopefully continue on supporting me on a episode by episode basis.
I like that idea. Very cool.
Anyways, I have to head off.
All right,
Thanks for
Mark.
having me
Thanks,
on,
Mark.
guys.
Thanks,
so
man.
much.
Thanks for jumping
That's
in.
a great tip.
Chris, have you seen, so if you were like have you seen Mark, so say I changed this and this changed. Have you seen anything in the last year where you've made a change and it's made a difference in support levels or anything like that?
Support levels, yes. I've had a couple of people increase their support. I also, again, using Patreon, I eliminated probably maybe 2 years ago, I eliminated the dollar level. So I started at $2. And I've been debating maybe next year. I've been debating maybe dropping and making the minimum 5 or 3.
Yeah.
But I've had some who changed their level in the last couple of years. And just by changing the language a couple of years ago to, if you're getting value, to getting a couple more. I'm not going to retire off of my Patreon supporters, but it certainly helps to, pay for Podpage and pay for Libsyn and, all those different things that, could I pay for it myself? Yes, but it's nice to have the support of the listeners.
Don't you think, like, for infrastructure, I'm actually, I listened to a podcast and he says, help us keep the lights on. And I was like, if you're going into podcasting, aren't you expected to pay for some of those things? Now, it's nice, like, the give. That's why I like where Mark's going with this. If you want to give back and not make it about paying the bills, right? Make it about, like, I think as a business owner, if I'm doing this in whether it's hobby or, we don't need to get into that argument, but
you said the H word, man.
Regardless of why you're doing it, I think the listener just kind of expects, if you're in this, you're covering the costs. Now, if I'm getting entertainment from it, if I'm getting education from it, if I'm getting that value and I want to give back, that's why I think this is brilliant that Mark is saying. Then it makes sense. Yeah, you're kind of like, oh yeah, I am getting value out of this thing. And as opposed to helping you pay your bills.
Well, I mean, when I first started, I think I was talking about, and I've been using Awesome Supporter the whole time.
Yeah.
So, when I first started promoting that, yes, it was a little awkward to ask, but then I got the first one. And for a long time, I only had one. And that person got their shout out. They're still with me, as my longtime supporter. And, it just took one. And, it's, I ask. And again, it was that shift of, I used to do that whole infrastructure thing, but now it's, hearing all about this value for value. I'm not ready to take the steps and, start doing boostergrams and, accepting cryptocurrency for what I do. But Dave, on that, I did follow your video a couple weeks ago that you put out on YouTube about how to set that up. I forget the service, but I went and followed the video, set that up. So it's there.
Alby is
Alby, yes.
And now they created a thing that shows you a dashboard so you can see how much. It's really weird because some people will give you like 2 Satoshis a minute. And when you do the math on that, like, oh, they just paid me 3 cents. So it's an interesting thing, but that's the joy of Bitcoin and that whole 9 yards. But that's the thing. That's one of the biggest challenges with that is that if I donate, like one of the people are taking all sorts of numbers, like 2222 looks like a bunch of ducks in a way, well, that's like 87 cents or something like that. And 2112 is a famous album from Rush, and that's like, $1.06 or something like that. So it sounds like, wow, I gave you 2,000 Satoshis, and it's like, yeah, that's 75 cents. So, I'll take 75 cents, but
you mentioned that. So I remember, I think on New Media Show this week, they were talking about, if you give us if you hit a certain level, we'll send you some stickers. And I quick did the math in my head, and I'm like, yeah, that many Satoshis is probably the cost of a sticker.
Yeah, that's about it. So awesome. Anything else, Chris? If not, we'll let you get back to the bike,
man. That's all
man.
I had. I got to keep pedaling, and I just want to let people know that if you want to get people to support, they won't support you if they don't know that they can. So come up with your way to ask.
And your website is?
chrisnessy.com.
There you go. And Chris is CHRIS. There we go.
Yes, sir.
Thanks,
guys.
Chris. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it. Dave, I got a question for you around this. So part of, and I've stopped doing this week because I just ran out, but I give a little Home Gadget Geeks coin, 3D printed
coin. Yeah, I remember that.
And I had a bunch of them. We gave them all away. But I had a listener in Canada, speaking of Mark, a listener in Canada subscribe and on Patreon, and I had my last coin. Cost me $15 to send to Canada, right? I kind of knew it was going to be expensive. I didn't know it was going to be that expensive, but I promised, and so I sent it. Do you think it's worth it to send, in this case, that's 3 times the amount of value I'm getting out of the Patreon subscription, right? It's $5 a month. Now, chances are that this subscriber is going to hang on for a year or two, right? Right. And so you're going to more than make that up. In business, we do this all the time. We call it a loss leader, right? We put something out there. Do you think that's good business, though, to drop 15 on a $5 Patreon, thinking it's a risk, but thinking that may have long-term implications?
I would say my knee-jerk reaction is yes, and if you're not doing a ton of those, you know what I mean? It's like, wow, I had this, I lost $50. I was just listening to Podland, and they're talking about how Acast has a minus 31% profit margin. Like they're just bleeding money, which is why they laid off so many people. And they said in the past they were focused on growth. Now they're focused on, hey, we should probably maybe try to make some money with this kind of thing. So if it's not, it's going to be different as always. It's going to depend. But I see it as, especially if it's something, because that coin is something that only certain people have. So that's kind of one of those, you can't get it everywhere. And it's a way, depending on what they do with it, that might have people go, what is that? Oh, it's from this thing. That's kind of the bonus of a T-shirt is somebody basically becomes a walking billboard. So, and like you said, I would go in and look at your patrons and see how long they stick around, make sure, like you said, if they're probably going to give you, whatever, $20 over, the next year or so or whatever. And, but yeah, I think it is.
That's actually an idea that maybe I'll switch over to T-shirts because those are easier to ship. Because if you go through the Amazon thing, you can go in. They're shipping those things from different locations, so you don't have to deal with the shipping costs. And you can get those T-shirts down to about $9 or $10.
Yeah,
right?
Well, it's probably closer to 20 by the time you get in shipping, depending on where it's at. Yeah. It's coming this week. Because I think the shirts are better. I ordered one from Sticker Mule, and it's a little different than TeePublic. TeePublic, you can put up a store and anybody can buy them. This is basically, I want a shirt, and I basically uploaded my design and made one shirt, had it come to me. And the thing I loved about it is they were a little more honest about it. It was like, hey, it's $19 for the shirt, free shipping. All these other places, it's like, hey, it's $10 for the shirt, and then you find out later it's also $10 for shipping. Yeah. But for a one-off shirt, I think I forget who it was asked me a couple weeks ago, where does Dave get all of his cool shirts? I make them. I just go to, so I have one now coming from Sticker Mule that's coming up. We actually have someone waiting on whatever the name of this app is, that
Wisdom.
So I would so hang tight there, and so I think anytime you can get stuff. But Mark got me thinking. I'd have to see if I have enough books now. I should make it that anybody that signs up for a $20 thing, that would pay for shipping for a book. Yeah. Like you get a book, and then
do you have a box? Do you have a box of those things?
I have a box of books. I have a box in my car, and then I have from Sticker Mule. Can I get them in time? Anyway, I have bags that say School of Podcasting on them that I use to mail them out. Okay. So it's nice. But that might be a thing. If I did, I'd have to go look and see how many $20 supporters I have. That might empty my, and then you get into a weird thing. If I go, hey, starting now, well, everybody who's been paying me $20 for months, like I know Glenn already has one. But I have to look at all my other $20 supporters. And,
maybe you could give them the option, right?
We lost our person.
Sorry, Wisdom. Come back, Wisdom. Come back. Maybe you can give them the option. So when I was giving out this coin and I would get overseas, I'm in the United States, I would say, hey, and I even asked this new subscriber, hey, do you want the coin? He goes, well, if you can ship it to me, that'd be great. And so, but I've had others like in Australia go, yeah, that's not going to be great. Don't worry about it. Like, I got it.
That is true. That's a good move because we were at Content Marketing World, myself and Rob Walsh, And we were getting down to the end of the t-shirts, and we know that the next time we go to an event, we're probably going to get different colored t-shirts. It's the thing that Libsyn does. We change the colors out every now and then. And so we just started asking everybody, would you like a free t-shirt? Would you like a free t-shirt? Would you like a free t-shirt? And we had some people like, you know what? I'm not going to wear it. Like, I guess I could give it to my kid. They're like, but really just keep it. And we're like, okay. So that's cool that you did that, because there are going to be some people like, you can ship me the coin thing, but it's just going to go in my drawer and nobody's going to see it or whatever. And that's cool. So yeah, because again, if it's a patron, they're on your team. So they're going to let you know if it's not, that's not going to fit. I'd rather have a t-shirt than a coin or a, whatever it is. So that's interesting.
Yeah. And it wasn't super popular. Chris in chat says that he tried a limited edition 3D printed coin too. Ironically, the guy who printed them for me is up in Canada, and he shipped them down. I think I probably paid $20 to get them shipped down from Canada. And then I should just have him hold on to a few and then have him ship them for my Canadian listeners, have him ship the coins, and I just reimburse him for it. He'd do it for me if I asked him. But maybe the next go around, stickers were popular for a while. I don't know if they're as popular now, but stickers would be an easy thing to do, to think like, I'm going to make a sticker, and if you're already on Patreon, everybody's going to get one of those because they're easy to mail. And then new Patreon supporters will get those with a thank you note from me or something like that. Just continue to think of ways to keep eyes on Patreon if that's what you're focusing on, right?
Yeah, Daniel says you could do something like earn a challenge coin when you pay yearly or after 6 months of membership. That way, it's not a loss leader. Like, let them, when they've paid enough to where it pays for it, which basically means you're going to break even. But you could have it to where, it almost gamifies it when you've reached your 1 year status or whatever. Because you can go into Patreon. There are people that have been supporting me since like we launched that thing, and you're like, whoa, they gave me how much money over whatever 4 years or whatever, and it's like $5 at a time. But if you do that for 5 years, you're like, oh, hold on. Gary says he recently bought a shirt from Photo Ripper. Photo Ripper, because his photography videos are so entertaining and fun. $47 with shipping, but it felt good supporting his work. I have been doing the whole listen on apps that stream Satoshi things, and it's weird because I was using one called Castapod, which basically is Overcast. Like, I don't know how that guy is able to do that, but he apparently stole a lot. He was inspired a lot, shall we say, by Overcast. And so I looked down the one day and it's like, hey, you're out of funds. Like, you've been listening to podcasts. And I kind of felt like guilty, like, because it's just one of those things where what I was doing was taking like $20 a month, throwing it into this thing, and whoever I listened to, and I was streaming, I don't know, it was like I think $1 an hour, which again is nothing, but I was like trying to spread it out to people. And then I looked down, I was like, oh, I'm out of cash.
Can you take what you earn from others and just give that back away?
That's what I can now with this Alby app. It's basically an online wallet. And so it is my input. So if you were to boost the show right now, this show is set up for that, by the way. You could send me a boost and it would go into my Alby wallet. And then I've also I could set it up to where I could go to other shows and, boost them and send it back. So in the end, the people that win are whoever's earning the fees on all the transfers or whatever. But it's just another. That's going to be a fun one to see what happens in like 5 years, as the whole Bitcoin thing becomes more and more fun and things of that nature. So it'll be interesting to see. But there was another company, I can't remember the name of it, but and I'll put a link in the show notes. I'll have to dig it out. I just found them. For the record, I do have an affiliate with them, and I wish I could remember their name. But it's kind of like a TeePublic, only. What they do, and not that TeePublic doesn't do this, but they are all about teaching you like what makes a good t-shirt and how to sell. It's almost like they give you the tools to make a t-shirt shop, but they also train you on how to do a t-shirt shop. And I was like, that's a cool, like the other ones are just like, here's the thing, upload your image and hit, set your price. It's super easy. And I was like, well, that's cool, but this one's gone like an extra step to really, get you going and because that's what you need. You know, we're not marketers. We just want to make a T-shirt or whatever. And I did a quick search through my Gmail, and I am not seeing the name of that company. But I'll find it.
Is it Redbubble? Daniel had said
it might be. Let me see here real quick. I know this makes for astounding audio. No, I'll find it. It's but it was pretty cool, whoever it was, and I was like, that's a different somebody going a different angle at the whole swag thing. So,
right.
But I tell you what, since we're talking about our awesome supporters, let me unmute the woman in the tube and mute me. Let's see, we'll do this. So we're going to get a lovely little buzz and open awesome supporters.
From askthepodcastcoach.com/support, looks like it's Max at aviationnewstalk.com.
There we go. So,
Max is a good guy too.
So thank you, Max, for being an awesome supporter. If you would like to be an awesome supporter, simply go to askthepodcastcoach.com/support. Notice I'm not going, since we're talking about this subject, I didn't say patreon.com/Dave Jackson, because if something comes along better, well, actually, there are things that are better right now than Patreon. You know, I'd be kind of stuck with whatever 300 episodes of me saying patreon.com/Dave Jackson. Instead, askthepodcastcoach.com/support. We just talked about Max over at aviationnewstalk.com, and Ask the Podcast Coach runs on Podpage. If you'd like to try Podpage, well, simply go over to trypodpage.com. It's an awesome way to make a website. And if you just can't get enough Jim Collison, then go over to theaverageguy.tv and check out Home Gadget Geeks. And when you think podcasting, think schoolofpodcasting.com. I would love to help you with your podcast. And if you'd like to be an awesome supporter, again, askthepodcastcoach.com/support. I guess what I should say is, if you find this show has any value to you, if you're the person that comes up to me in a conference and goes, I just want to thank you so much for everything you do in the podcast space, there's something you can do to really show your love for the show. And that's go to askthepodcastcoach.com/support. So there we go. We do appreciate that. I know I had starred a question many moons ago. Here we go. DR asked a question on websites, and Sergeant Fred was trying. Oh, he's in. Good. I actually see him now. Hold on. We'll hold on DR's question. He's back. I think we can hear you.
Hey, can you hear me, Dave?
We can hear you. Good to go.
Okay, I know that my camera is very, very blurry right now.
That's all right.
There's some goop on the lens. I wanted to go from the very beginning of what you guys were talking about at the top of the show, about podcast names. And sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad to have a name that is so confusing, because it's very much like the podcast name that you may have of someone else. Key example on this is my lessons learned. Podcastreporter.com is the name of my podcast. You're familiar with that, Dave, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
And you too, Jim. But do you know who had the name podcastreport.com?
That would be Paul Culligan.
Exactly. And he stole it from someone else. Podcast Report was created years before, but he just took it because the other guy did not do anything with it. So I've gotten a lot of traffic from people who were initially searching for Podcast Report. Instead, they came to Podcast Reporter, and I've gained them as far as new audience members, and they've been subscribing ever since. And I don't have a subscribe button on my podcast show, so I've been getting good numbers. And Dave, you've been there before. You've seen the posts that I've had there. So sometimes it can backfire on you, and sometimes it can actually support you in getting more subscribers who actually like your show and stick with you.
There you go. Excellent.
Okay, that's just what I wanted to say. And I'll try and clean up my lens.
That's all right. It just looks like you're in witness protection or something.
Yeah, well, I'll try and clean it up. I've got another Zoom meeting that's going to be happening later on. I don't know what happened, but I had all twisted up. I had to restart my system in order to get all the assets working. Yeah. Have you had that problem with a lot of your connections?
On occasion, I always try, if I'm doing the more important the meeting, the more I am to restart my computer in the morning just to start off fresh is a lot of times how I do that. So
yeah, I think the one thing I should have done today was actually have that voice changer, the one that gets your voice like this, and the witness protection program.
That'd have been good. That'd have been really good.
Fred comes
Anyway,
home and he sounds
Thanks,
like
guys.
this.
We'll talk to you guys later. I'll let you get
See
to
you,
the other guy.
Fred.
All right.
See you, Fred. Take care.
All right.
Go
I
ahead.
came through the door and then never mind. Okay, go ahead.
Turn it off. There we go.
I like it. Well, he makes a good point, and it can go both ways. Like,
Yeah.
you can what may help you may hurt you, and at the same time. You know, you may be close enough to someone's site where they're getting confused with yours and going to theirs, or that may be vice versa. So, by the way, sometimes there's no way to avoid that. Like, you just, you know, you can't. I interviewed some folks last week they have Home Tech, and that was the original name of Home Gadget Geeks. And they took it. I stopped using it and they took it. Could there be some confusion from when I first started? Sure. Do you really worry about it? I don't know. It's a good question.
I know right now, if you type in School of into Apple Podcast, you're going to see greatness because of Lewis Howes. I might try this in October, which is in a week, I'm going to put podcast school dash from the School of Podcasting just as a fun experiment, like change my name for a month and see if it does anything to
a month
to
may
boost
not
them.
be enough. May not be enough for the engines to pick up.
It would be interesting because if somebody's looking for podcasting, they're not going to type in school, or they might type in learn or whatever. But it's like if the first word was podcast, it'd be interesting to see, you know, if that makes a difference or not. But there are. I always laugh. The last time I checked, I think there were 16 shows called Thinking Outside the Box, because I thought, well, there are 16 people who were not thinking outside the box when it came to their name. The other thing I'm noticing here today, I'm standing up, and I swear it looks like I have a green screen. Is it just me or my headphones keep disappearing, or I don't know if it's the lighting or what? I realize
it does. It does.
But that's not a green screen. That's an
oh, you know what it is. So the top of your headphones are the same color as the background.
Yeah.
And so it looks like we're getting a little halo around your head.
Your head.
Yeah.
Excellent.
There you go.
Yeah.
Why? I was gonna ask you if you were standing up. You sway when you're standing up.
That's
right?
the problem. Yeah, I realize that, and I have to move to be in the center of the screen and the center of my backdrop. I have to stand over like another foot. But yeah, I sway a lot, and I have to remember to stay next to the microphone a little more. And I don't know if that's fun to watch. You know, let's watch Dave sway back and forth.
It's a little It's a little distracting. I'm not saying that from my point of view.
Yeah.
I don't care. But I've had people say to me when they're watching people who are standing and they're swaying, that's distracting, right?
Yeah.
One of the things we do I've been doing a lot of LinkedIn Lives lately for our Clifton Strengths work. And I use a headset in my office standing to kind of change. Like, we want that LinkedIn Live to have a different feel than Called to Coach. And so I change locations. I do it out of my office. I do it while I'm standing, and I use a headset. I have a pretty good headset, which helps do that. And it just kind of separates the two. And I move around a lot more when I'm standing, but it seems to work.
Well, the other thing I do is like I'm pushing buttons and I'm looking at chats and things like that. And when I do that, I tend to move just ever so slightly. I did find out, because we've got 28 people watching on Wisdom. If you click the little plus sign under my blinking head, that will basically request to come up on stage. So if you're listening on the Wisdom app and you have a question, feel free to raise your hand. Of course, if you're watching live, just throw them into the chat. And if you want to jump into the video, you can go to askthepodcastcoach.com/join. And if we go back to DR's question on websites, if you have one, do you necessarily need or should have a S&M group?
No, SM.
Oh, SM group. So listeners can engage with each other. So is she saying small group? Small, have a SM group.
I took it more like, do you have a Facebook group or Slack,
Discord? Yeah,
those kinds of things.
You I mean, the quick answer is
social media is I think what that stands for. Social media.
There we go. The tricky part of that is, and this is where it's scary, what if you do it, nobody shows up? So I can see why, because if you do and 3 people show up, then you should definitely engage with those 3 people.
Yeah.
But the problem is if you do it and, 3 people show up and then nothing happens and it's just the 4th person shows up and they're like, wow, the last comment in here was from April.
Yeah, you've got to work it.
You've got
in
to
fact,
work.
it's better if nobody shows up than if 2 people show up,
Yeah.
right? Then like, okay, this isn't working this way. Hey, I have a Discord group, and there's probably 10 who are active, and the expectation is it's not going to be every day.
Yeah.
And it's a very nerdy group. We share deals and we talk about in depth, coding and some things around home automation and stuff like that. And the expectation is just not going to be every day. So none of them are clamoring. I'm not getting this is a dead group. No one's talking, because they talk when they need to talk. They don't talk just because they're filling space.
I have people at the School of Podcasting that just lurk. I'll see like, hey, you didn't see anything, blah, blah, blah. I haven't really seen you do much. And they're like, oh, I'm just lurking. That's, I really enjoy the group. I just like to watch. And I was like, oh, okay. So, yeah. So it is what it is. It's groups are tricky. They really are. I really like my Facebook group for the School of Podcasting. I'm trying to get them to move to the built-in community that I now have in Podia. And that's a fun little, as much as we all complain about Facebook, we're already there. And so it's one of those things where when you log in now to the School of Podcasting, it instantly takes you to my built-in community. So it shows you, and I'm basically just posting things in both places at this point. But that does a good job of kind of getting you to like, hey, I'm already there. But there are people that have at the School of Podcasting that have blown through every bit of material I have, and they're just there for the community. So they're not logging into the to see more courses because they've already seen them. They might log in to get the schedule of the group coaching or whatever, but they're not getting that smack in the face of the community where they just log into Facebook and there it is.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And where you go isn't as important as will they follow you there? Like, DR says, Circle. Well, that's another social platform, right? And they've got some good stuff going on with Circle. Like you can do a lot with Circle.
My original, here's a great topic. No matter what you do, no matter what microphone you buy, website you do, whatever technology you buy, as soon as you buy it, within 6 months, something's going to come out that you go, oh.
Yeah.
Because I spent almost a year researching and moving. And I was 99% done. I was going to flip the switch on Teachable and Circle. And I hit a snag with Teachable, and I wasn't really happy with the way the courses looked in Teachable. It just, and their answer to everything was you can hire someone. And I was like, I'm already paying you $80 a month. I already hired somebody. How can I get this blue to not be, like I would have blue buttons with blue text. And I was like, come on, that's got to be an easy fix. But anyway, so I switched to Podia, and I had a friend of mine that said, man, I'm telling you, Teachable and Circle is the way to go. And I was like, and I couldn't get people off of Facebook. I'm like, I'm not going to pay $80 for Circle if nobody's going to use it. But I joined, it's learn.community. I wish I could remember Tom's name, but it's the guy that teaches community, like how to build a community. So good. I've been there a week and learned a bunch of stuff. And he's a big, as you might imagine, Circle guy, because Circle is, hands down, from what I've seen, the best tool. Not Slack, not Discord. It looks cool, and there's so many options. And now you can live stream right from Circle. And of course, they now enable you to sell courses. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Yeah, it's a really cool service. And I still, there's a part of me that goes, maybe someday I make just a podcast community. Like I see people do this, like masterminds, and but that's always kind of interesting because you have to kind of interview the people and blah, blah, blah. And it'd be another thing. And that's the other thing I've noticed is that whole like, oh, I know how to do this. It'd be easy to set up. It's like, yeah, but you need to leave time to,
Well,
promote it and stuff.
Totally. Throw Dan's question in there. He says, is there a point? He says, Dave Jackson, is there a point where you stop stop Facebook? I didn't sign in as me today, so I can't get to the questions. But is there a point where you stop Facebook for the new community, even if everyone's there, even if everyone doesn't move over, or will you always post to both if you can't get everyone to move over? And I think it's a super valid question. Like, at what point do we stop, or do we stop using Facebook? I think, how are you going to do that?
That's there are a couple things that I wish, like Podia is pretty mobile friendly. Like you can go to you could, put Podia on your whatever desktop on your phone and join the community that way. It's not as cool, again, as Circle, but that would be a way where I could just go, hey, here's what I want to do is, and I'm thinking 2023, just make a quick newsletter. Here's what happened at the School of Podcasting this week. So-and-so is trying to connect his mixer to a such and such. Jim was wondering what's the best tool for such and such. Mark had great success asking for value, and then have links to those topics in the community, kind of hey, here's what you're missing by not being in the community. And then also, I know Circle does that. They put out a newsletter. Here's what people were talking about in Circle this week. And I was like, that's pretty cool. And Circle, again, because it's so cool, if you want, can generate that for you automatically. Podia does not. And that's, I really kind of go, because what I was doing was I was basing decisions on the audience I currently have, not the audience I will have in a few years. So I'm not upset. Podia does exactly what I needed to do for now, but I am limited on some things. And so it's like, I could tie Circle into Podia if I wanted to, but I'm already using Volley. I do a lot of coaching using the Volley app. And I was like, look, I can't have Podia and Volley and Facebook. I was like, no. So, because originally I was going to set up my community in Volley, which is a great app. And when I just saw how hard it was to get people off Facebook. But what's cool is Tom, the guy from this learn.community thing, sent me a personal thing, and they've talked about how to get people off Facebook. So I'm looking into that. It seems like a really helpful place. So, and I'll have to go look and see if Tom has an affiliate program. But I told him, I said, his onboarding, and that's a lot of times why I will buy podcasting courses, not because I want the content. I want to see what their onboarding process is, because it's the teacher in me. DR says, in a course that switched from Teachable, wait, I missed her first thing. I think, did I miss her first comment? I'm in a course that switched from Teachable to Kajabi. Oh, yes. Kajabi is a great marketing thing. Just do not use them for your podcast. As the last time I checked, they do not have a 301 redirect. Now, what does that mean? That means if you start your podcast on Kajabi, it's going to live on Kajabi forever. And from what I hear, their stats are not, I know they're not IAB certified, but in theory, if you're on Kajabi with your podcast, you're not looking for advertisements. You should be using your stuff that you're selling through Kajabi as your own sponsor. But for me, not having a 301 redirect is a deal breaker for me. That's been on my list of deal breakers for a while.
We moved our Facebook group when it just died. Like we had folks on Discord, and then I had a Facebook group and a Discord group, and I was maintaining both. And then the Facebook group just stopped. Like at some point, everybody made the jump. It worked. I have no problem maintaining two. It's just two places to go. Like I feel like I need to go as a podcaster. I need to go where my audience is, and meet them on the platform that they want to be met on, and not be the one like, we're only going to have one place. And if that means excluding you, then that's what I'm doing. Right. I don't want to exclude anybody. I want everybody to have access. Now, the Facebook group eventually just petered out. Nobody goes there anymore. And the Discord group has more, people on it. So I think sometimes run them until they just kind of run to their natural conclusion. And if they stop, close it down. You don't have to, if you haven't any message there in 6 months or a year, you know, like, hey, we haven't any messages here. I'm shutting this thing down.
Yeah. DR asked, what does IAB stand for? Interactive Advertising Bureau. That's the people that kind of came up with the standards for podcasting. That's the one where you have to listen to a minute or consume a minute of content for it to count. So if you're, there are no streams, for the record. When somebody clicks play on a website, it is it's downloading it in chunks.
Progressive? Do they call
Progressive
it progressive
download. Thank you. Yeah, it's a progressive download. And so somebody has to listen to a minute of that to count as a download. Now, if they downloaded it, well, the whole thing's downloaded. So it counts as a download, even though they didn't listen to a single second of it. So it's not perfect, but it's better than there is a thing going on right now that somebody's trying to make an open version of stats, and good luck to you on that, because the first thing I saw when I started working at Libsyn is I see the number of downloads that a file gets, and I see the number of downloads that count, and it is a huge difference. Like, there are all sorts of bots and their cousins and their aunts and uncles. The whole bot family is coming for your MP3 file.
Yep.
And I was like, holy smokes. They're like, yeah. And then it's kind of expensive. You have this list that you sign up for that knows where all the bots are, so you can help them. And so I forget, it's open 3P something, whatever thing they're trying to make it. But So Randy asked, what am I using for courses? I was on Thinkific. The reason I moved from Thinkific, and I'm not making this up, was my bill went up about $80 because they charge you a dime for every person over, I believe it was 100 students. And they counted my affiliates as students. And I was like, what? And I was like, that doesn't scale. So I moved to Teachable and never flipped the switch. I was this close. And that was the other thing. I went to import my people into Teachable, and they wanted me to upgrade. And I went, to get my students into? No. So I moved to Podia. Podia is very simple to use. Lots of powerful things. Like, if I wanted to, I could probably dump my ConvertKit and use them for my email program. It's great for lead magnets. I can sell webinars. It's really simple. It's not like, it does what it does well, but it's not super customizable. Like, I found a cool script that I could buy at AppSumo, and you have to put like a little bit of script in the head of your computer, or the head of your website. You cannot do that on Podia. They do not let you put anything in the heading section. And I was like, oh, and I kind of emailed them. I said, hey, I think I found the first thing I don't like about Podia. And they're like, yeah, that's kind of our Achilles heel. It's not meant for super geeky people. And I was like, oh, I'm not super geeky, but been kind of that. So going back to our conversation about different Facebook groups and such, she's trying to get used to Discord. The thing that gets me about Discord, man, that's ugly. Like that.
It's intentionally ugly. I mean, they don't. It's not designed. It was really it's a response to the commercialism of Facebook and those other spaces, and so they try to keep it very slim. It's very light. It's about features, not about form. And so, but you can broadcast on Discord. You can do audio and video.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some cool things you can do. But it comes from the geeky, like, Discord comes out of the gaming community.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Daniel says that when he ran Podcasters Society, he started with WooCommerce memberships, but then switched to MemberPress. That was a seamless switch for my audience because I own the platform and the data. Yep. Yeah, switching from one platform to the other is no fun because in my case, I still have, I think, 6 people that they created a subscription, which is in Stripe, from Thinkific. But then I moved, and I can't tie their subscription to Podia. It just, so I've been emailing them nonstop going, hey, which is interesting because it then dawns on you that these people are paying you and not doing anything. Like, they're not even opening your emails that say, hey, this is important, please open this. Hey, and then these are also the same people in 6 months that are going to go, hey, I've been paying you $50 a month for 6 months and I want my money back. And you're like, yeah. So start a membership, folks, kids. It's a heck of a lot of fun. So, and that's just the way it is. So, but
Go
DR
ahead.
says it's got to be pretty enough for me to keep coming back. Yeah, it's not Braille. I actually have to look at it. So,
Yeah, but on the opposite side, I hear from individuals all the time who can't stand the commercial look of Facebook or of
Yeah.
Twitter or of like they don't want the noise. They want a conversation. And I like Discord. I can do any of them. Doesn't matter to me. But they don't want the noise of Facebook. They don't want the advertising. They don't want so the point on Discord is to get everything out of the way so that you can have these discussions, right? And to Daniel's point, he mentions in chat too, they don't threaded discussions. It's not Facebook. Like the strength of Discord is not to create threaded conversations. And so if that's what you're trying to do, yeah, Discord's not your tool. You know, you got a hammer and you're trying to use it like a saw. You know? Yeah.
Well, I even reached out to the School of Podcasting because again, what's kind of frustrating is the people that hear me go, hey, I've got this tool. It's free for you. It works on every platform. Come download this app and you and I can have one-on-one conversations unlimited, and they don't move. But the people that do are like, oh, this is the best thing ever. You know, Kim from The Pharmacist's Voice, I was at Podcast Movement. She asked me a question about Squadcast. I walked over to the Squadcast booth and had them answer it. She's like, okay, that was cool. So you can kind of tell them like, hey, here's what you're missing out. But it's tricky to get people to do that. Like you said, different tools do different things, and you know it's a matter.
Yeah. Like Discord really focuses on like rooms. Like, hey, if we're going to discuss these things, let's discuss them. It's a little like Slack in that regard. Now they're all kind of blending together because they've heard all the feedback and they're all trying to be like each other. So you can do it that way. Like Stargate Pioneer says there, but it's just a different way of looking at it. And there's no one that's great. Yeah. This is the one thing where, two or more are gathered, there will be somebody complaining. So like,
you mentioned Facebook, and I had somebody, I forget who it was, what group I was in. And they said, I want to participate in a group. Like somebody made a Facebook group. And they said, I haven't been on Facebook in years. And the minute I logged in, it was just like everything I don't want to see just buried me. Right. And they're like, it's a bummer. So there are people that absolutely hate Facebook. I've got good at hiding people. I do have one person that keeps posting on my profile. And it's weird at times you have to be like, I'm just going to have to delete this person or block them or something. But it's like, they're not even asking for permission. I go to my profile sometimes to go, did I post this yet? And I go, oh, actually you did. Okay. And then I'll like right in the middle of my stuff is their stuff. And I was like, I spoke at your event 3 years ago. Like, why are you posting on my profile? It's like, that's kind of, but that's one where I was like, Facebook, so.
Yeah.
Well, here's some good news. Next week, according to one Daniel J. Lewis, the Audacity podcast will be coming back, discussing podcasting 2.0, and after that, I'll be talking about censorship potential since iOS 14.5. So we all look forward to that. I was gonna send him a message. I'm like, September has about 6 days left, 6 or 7, and you said you're coming back in September.
We're getting close.
I was like,
getting closer.
If you're going to save your integrity, buddy, you got 6 days to do it. You said September. So
Daniel, let's just you and I, let's have a talk for a second. If you miss the date, don't worry about it. It's fine.
Yeah, we still love you.
It's okay. It's fine. Like nobody's going to die. We're not curing cancer or doing heart surgery. It'll be fine. But if you do hit it, awesome. Good for you. If you don't, it's still okay.
Yeah. Here's a fun topic that I saw that again, kind of going back with websites and stuff. This was in Reddit, and they are using Anchor, so we won't hold that against them. But they said they're trying to share their login. I was wondering if there's a way to share a podcast on Anchor, and the answer to that is no. You get one email, and that's it, so that multiple people can access the back end of our podcast. Has anyone ever experienced this? And there are other, I know with Libsyn, you have to ask, hey, can I add an editor to my thing? And we will add that. So it's not super easy, but places like Captivate and Buzzsprout make it pretty easy. But there's also, if you are on Anchor and you're like, because you have to be careful sharing your login name and password. That's not something I typically recommend. And LastPass is a service that I've used, and they have this cool feature where you can, and it's free to use. They have a pro plan, but you could basically have your editor, whoever you're trying to share a password with, and this could work on a website, it could work on anything. And what's cool about it is they get LastPass, you share your login name and password with them, and LastPass will fill it in when they go to that website without them seeing the login name and password. And the beautiful thing about that then is, in the event that person turns into a weenie, you can go in and take away their access to use that tool. And that's the thing I like about it, because, there are times when Bert and Ernie don't get along, and all of a sudden Bert's going in and deleting all the episodes, and you're like, wait, hold on. And you just take away their access and they can't get access to your stuff. So I'm sure there are other tools that do that. I know there's another, drawing a blank. That seems to be the theme today. Dave is drawing a blank. There's another really popular.
It's because you're standing.
Like all the blood is going to my legs.
There could be some science to that. That might be true. Like, I know I have to stand. Sometimes when I want to think, I stand. Like if I'm sitting, I don't think I'm as creative as when I'm standing. So I do, like, maybe I should just go full-time stand. But man, I move around. I am a mover. So it's better that I'm sitting down.
Coach Dave had it. 1Password is the other popular one I'm thinking of. Share with Target. Yeah. So that's pretty cool.
Boy, this is some. I would be really, really careful sharing password and password manager passwords.
Oh yeah, never.
Lots of them have services where you can, like, that they you can share certain things with them and whatever. Just be really careful with that. I would prefer maybe to have a secure document somewhere on Google or something where we shared those. I wouldn't be comfortable any kind of sharing with my password manager, regardless of what it is.
Really?
Yeah. I wouldn't, even if the service, even if they said, oh yeah, they can't see anything.
Maybe. Yeah.
I'd rather have a document, a secure document somewhere where that password is, that shared password for that. That would be my preference on that.
Yeah. I always get nervous because you have 1Password.
Yeah.
To get into all of your passwords. And I remember once it was like my password wasn't long enough. They had updated it and said, hey, what's blah, blah, blah. And it was supposed to be 5 characters or supposed to be 7 characters and mine was 5. So I had to add 2 characters to my master password. And it was the whole time I'm typing it, I'm like, okay, I got to make sure I get this right, because if I get it wrong, I lose all my stuff. And I don't do any banking. I don't do any credit cards. It's just login names and passwords. Let's see.
Hold on. Let me finish this thought. I'm also not a big fan of shared accounts where you have admin and a password, and you have 3 people who know, if I use admin, I use this password. Now, I know that's the only way to do things from time to time, but that's also not a great way to do things. You want named accounts, like especially on your website, like especially if you're running WordPress.
Yeah.
You want named accounts, and you want to be able to track that just from a, like, who's who.
Yeah.
And who's doing what, and how did people do those kinds of things. So not a fan of that either, where we have one account, one admin account that's admin, and everybody
never. Yeah.
Right? No, you don't want to do that either.
Well,
so I know
Daniel,
you can't. Sometimes you can't. But
Daniel wants to make sure we're on the same page. We're not saying share your LastPass password. I go into LastPass and I forget exactly. It's been a while since I've done this. You go into your LastPass and say,
yeah. No, I understand.
You understand?
I
okay.
understand. Yeah. I'm not a fan of those. I'm not. I don't like. That's not a. I don't want it. I'm like, especially with those passwords, I'm just a little, I like the walled garden there. And I don't want anybody having access to my passwords through that service. Any of the services. It's not just LastPass, but any of the services.
Well,
that's my threat profile, right? That's what I think. Doesn't mean you can't do it. I don't want anybody to have access to my.
And if your login to WordPress is admin, do not change that immediately. Holy cow. I'm trying to think of a British word for weenie. A weenie is, well, let's go this route, Craig. A weenie is wiener is sometimes used to describe a hot dog. Mm-hmm. And so when I say a weenie, I'm talking hot dog-ish kind of thing. So, somebody who's, it's not a compliment. Let's go that route. When I say don't be a weenie, it's a polite way of saying things that aren't polite. Let's see here. Richard says LastPass has share function for a single password. Yeah, that's what we were talking about.
Yeah, and
Jim is saying, I'm still not. No, sorry.
Not for me. Not for me. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Uncle Marv's in the same boat. Sharing passwords? No, sorry. Yeah. Excellent. Yeah. So there we go. Here's how much time? Well, this will be good. I need help with rethinking. This is from Facebook. This is a long question, but I think this is a good discussion for the last 15 minutes here. I need help rethinking my interview questions. I've been using the same interview questions for a year now. Now, right there, I kind of twitch a little, and I feel like they've gotten stale. Okay, sometimes I get very interesting answers that I can build more on or more questions on and tend to be lackluster, depending on the guest. The intention of my podcast is to talk about people's undergraduate college experience in a particular field. I ask the basic questions about the field and how they navigated their experience, but was wondering if there are more engaging questions to ask. This is my questions outline, and I would love to get feedback on it. So the first question is, can you tell me a little bit about the area of interest? Did you discover any misconceptions about the field? For example, what people think the degree is versus what it actually is. Another question, going back to before the degree, how did you get into this field? Did you know since childhood that you wanted to be in this field? Next question, what were some very difficult things about either the classes you had to take and or the college experience? Were there times that you felt like quitting? If so, what helped you push through? How did you navigate the college experience? Was it a lot of work to figure out how to sign up for classes and figure out which ones to take? What are some of the helpful tips you can share from your experience in college or after college? This could be anything from dorm room hacks, interview tips, and anything in between. Are there any things you would have done differently if you could? And so what are you doing now? Is it related to the field you graduated in? If not, then is there any specific reason why you switched to something else? And so I saw that and was just kind of like, My first question is like, who's your audience? Because if I'm interviewing somebody from field A and then field B and field C, the only thing I can see there that would overlap would be stories about the college experience, because they're talking about, well, I thought I was going to be a software engineer, and then I got the degree, and I ended up doing blah, 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 I don't know. I get the whole John Lee Dumas, let's ask the same questions. But to me, I picture an interview. Each one is unique based on who you're talking to. I don't know, Jim, do you have any questions that you use all the time? Or
yeah. Well, here's the thoughts on the question. If you want to take your questions to the next level, and this is actually something we do a lot here at Gallup, so maybe it fits, it ties in since I'm in the studio today. With the questions you're asking, you should have some very clear, we call them listen for. So I know that kind of sounds weird, but as you're asking the question, you're looking for some kind of answer in it. And then with that listen for, we actually score those. Now we're looking for some specific things when we're asking questions, but I think too, as a podcaster, it's good to have some ideas of like, when I'm asking this question, what am I really looking for in the answer? What am I wanting to get out of that answer? And as they're giving it to you in your brain or even on a piece of paper, have a rubric that you're saying, okay, these are kind of some of the answers that I think that I'm looking for, and give it a score. if you don't get the answer you're looking for the first time, that means you need to rephrase the question and do it again. Come back, right? But what I really meant is this: it's kind of the next level in asking questions. I think some people think, I'm going to ask a question, I'm going to get a great answer the first time, and that's not always true, right? And so this is that next level of follow-up questions. You might even want to think, am I phrasing that question? If you keep track of the way you ask that question across guests and you're not getting a good answer the first time, maybe your question's bad. So it gives you an opportunity to go back and say, hey, if I ask the question differently, do I get a better response? Because we know in survey research, the way you ask the question is almost as important as the answer that you're getting. So score yourself on asking that question and then go back in and tweak it, test it, see if you can get a better response from guests. You may be confusing your guests in asking the question. And so if you can, I mean, again, it kind of, it's the next level in doing this. You've got to kind of disconnect from the just asking the questions and actually listen and then score the question. But I think it's a great way of kind of taking your questions to the next level, Dave, and then start saying, am I asking the right questions? Because what kind of response am I getting on it? Score the guest on the answer. No, that's just my thoughts.
Yeah, I like that idea. And I always say, somebody asked in Facebook as well, like, what's the best tool for editing? And I said, the best tool for editing is not the technology, it's knowing who your audience is so that you ask the right questions so that you don't have to edit out the stuff that doesn't, rain or things of that nature. So, yeah. And then I'm with you. I actually have there's a sheet at the School of Podcasting where it basically it's used for people that did an interview. And now I want to go back and kind of score myself on how was this interview. And the first thing is, okay, who's the name of the guest? Why did you bring them on? What were you hoping to learn? And then you look at your questions and just write down, just jot down a quick summary of what they answered. And then you can kind of look like, oh, I brought them on to learn about this. And about here, I got sidetracked and we ended up here. We never really brought them on. Eric Newsom has a book called Make Noise. And he says, when you look at your guest, what's the one question that only they can answer? And I was like, ooh, I like that one. That's a keeper. So,
well, you only get there if you actually go back and critically listen to yourself.
That's it.
Do the interviews. Like that is, I mean, yeah, you could do it live, but that's a little distracting. Our selection analysts who do that process here, they actually do the interview and record it, and then they have to go back and score it. And so it's part of and you can't score it if you don't have a rubric. And a rubric will force you to think through, like, okay, if I ask this question, a 1 would be this weak answer. A 2 would be a little bit stronger. A 3 would be right. Just that discipline of going back. When I was doing job interview, I did a lot of college students that were interviewing for jobs to be interns. And when I began to do that, I had a standard set of questions I asked. When I began to do that and then I would score them, it really forced me to think, like, is that a good question? Is that getting us anywhere? Like when I'm asking that, is it really getting us to the point of what we're trying to do in the overall interview? And I think it just helps you think critically about your own questions. And you're like, yeah, but Jim, I do a hobby podcast. Doesn't matter. Like you can learn to ask. I know you can learn to ask better questions, but you have to critically go back and listen to yourself and then say, oh yeah, I could probably do that. But a prime example is when Mark came on this morning, like that tidbit of information about, like, hey, not saying support, but saying give back. Well, that gets me thinking, like, okay, do I need to rephrase the way I say that? Because it's important.
Yeah.
And how you ask your questions is important.
And Coach Dave was saying this multiple times in the chat. It's amazing how, especially when you get into like conversions and anything with sales, it's like that call to action or the question, or little words can make a difference. I know, with websites and stuff, it's like, oh, we changed the button from red to yellow, and conversions went up by 13%. You're like, really? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, so testing that stuff.
Yeah, our we know in survey research that they ask the questions exactly as they're written, and they're like, we can't now. It's a different purpose, right? We're
Right.
not recording a podcast, but I think we can take some of that discipline from surveys and say, do we ask the question? I think in a lot of cases, like, stop asking the question over and over and over again when you're asking it, because a lot of people are like, hey, I'm going to give you my life story, and then I'm going to ask you a question, and then I'm going to repeat the question, and then I'm going to answer it for you, and then I'm going to ask you, what do you think? And it's 25 minutes of you asking the question and 3 minutes of them answering it, right? We got to just get out of our own way and just ask the question.
Well, that, and make sure the last thing you say is the question. I used to do this, and I think where people will go, so Jim, what was that time when you did the thing? And then you'll explain why you're asking the question. Because, sometimes you do this and then a thing. And I remember in 79, you did this. And then back in 84, you did this and blah, 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 blah. And Jim's like, what was the question? Because you asked it like 5 minutes ago.
Exactly.
So instead go, hey, I know in the 80s you did this and then you walked into this and blah, 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 blah. And so why do you blah, 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 blah? I used to do that. And my buddy Eric K. Johnson was like, yeah, don't do that. Like, end your question with the question. I was like, oh, wow, that makes sense. Yes, it does. So,
and then stop talking.
And then shut up.
That,
Exactly. Yeah, that's I did an episode last week kind of talking about why Joe Rogan is popular. And I found a video of him talking about podcasting. And he said, number one, I don't have a co-host because he considers it a dance between himself and the guest. And he goes, I basically, his thing was the skills you need to be a good podcaster are listening and thinking. And I was like, yeah, okay. And he said, when I ask a question, he goes, I'm doing nothing but listening to you. That's the only thing he's doing. And he goes, but I'm also kind of thinking, like, what's the next question or whatever. But it was interesting to see that. But that is the key, I think, to all good podcasts. It's not what comes out of your mouth. It's like the thinking and the listening that then helps you shape what comes out of your mouth. And that's it's not as easy as it looks. Again, the good ones make it look easy.
Pre-written questions are not always a bad idea. I don't know if you want to read them, but having them and keeping them short-ish based on the context of what you're trying to do, I think is a good discipline. What we mentioned Otter for the last couple of weeks in a row. We mentioned that, and one of the nice things is they give you a percentage of who talked in there.
If you're cool enough to be in the beta.
Is that what it is? Yeah.
Well, it's coming this week, September 27th. It'll come out of beta. But I asked him, I'm like, hey, my friend's in beta. He's got it. I'm on the pro plan.
Little FOMO.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, hey, he's got it. And their answer was, yeah, it's coming out of beta next week. And I was kind of like, yeah, I want it now. Like, they're like, nope, sorry, you're not Jim.
Well, it's a cool feature that allows you. And I think that may be because I was grandfathered in. We've used Otter for a long time, and maybe I was grandfathered in early on. But that percentage is just good to look at and say, if I'm talking 60% of the time and my guest is 40%, I might. I'm not saying it's for sure. I might have a talking problem. Yeah, I might have a talking problem.
Little controls issues, maybe, just a little bit. Oh, that's funny. So, Jim, I need you to answer. I know you've answered it before. Let me put up a marker so you can answer it now. Have you ever taken action towards a podcast after hearing their promo on another podcast?
Oh, for sure. Like to go listen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. I thought you were a big no on this one.
No. I mean, so like I've heard somebody on a podcast and I should go listen to their podcast. And
see, but that's hearing them as a guest.
Oh, you're meaning like a promo?
Yeah, like you hear it's like, hey, do you like, blah, blah, blah? Well, then you need to listen.
Yeah, that's definitely a no. I don't know, Dave, for sure. Maybe I have once. I can't remember, but I wouldn't say that's most of the time. It's because I've heard the guest and I'm like, oh yeah, I need to go listen to their show.
Got it. Yeah. Dan says something he finds helpful about questions is having backup questions. It's okay if I never ask them, but some people answer questions so directly that we run out of questions. Yeah, my whole thing is I have like 5 or 6 questions on a piece of paper to my left. I have a pen that doesn't click, and a piece of paper in front of me. That's how I do it. And that first question is the one I'm definitely going to ask. That's my first question, and that gets me going. And then from there, I just listen. And if there's a follow-up question, I ask it. If not, then I go back to the list. But the whole point of the pen that doesn't click and the pad is if they do say something, and I'm like, I want to ask them about that, I write down one word to trigger the question, so I don't have to remember the question as I'm trying to listen. And so I just might write down one thing. I remember I interviewed somebody, she said, I just knew I had to do something to make myself stand out. And she kept talking about the story, and I just wrote down one thing. So as soon as she got done with the story, I was like, okay, what's the one thing you did that made you stand out? Mm-hmm. So that's how I do that. But I always consider the 5 or 6 questions I have ahead of time as kind of the game plan. And then I will use that in the event there isn't some cool story that pops out that I want to follow that way. But that's what I would say. Interview somebody way before you do a real interview. Interview your aunt, uncle, kids, parents, whatever it is, because doing an interview is crazy in your brain, what's going on, because there's a lot going on while you're listening. So a couple quick questions here, and then we'll wrap up. Someone should host a Newlywed Game show format episode of Ask the Podcast Coach to see how well Jim and Dave can guess other response. That would be interesting to see.
Well, you had the right response. I didn't hear the right question. So maybe it was the way you phrased it. Maybe you could phrase that question a little bit better so I truly understand what you were thinking.
Well, Jim, what is coming up on Home Gadget Geeks this week?
Yeah, I took the week off. I do that from time to time. Actually had a guest cancel and move to a later week, and I asked around. Nobody said they wanted to join me. So I took the week off. But let me just say on the way out, International Podcast Day, right? Yeah. Happening here on the 30th. If you get an opportunity to interact with it, there's graphics and all kinds of stuff on the site. If you want to tag it, you got some stuff coming out, you should do that, International Podcast Day. So don't forget, September 30th.
Yeah. And I believe the website is internationalpodcastday.com, if I remember right.
Super easy to remember. I think they got a good site.
Yeah. So that would be 18 years now.
Really?
Yeah. Right. 2004 to 2022. Yeah.
Oh, like that's when podcasts started, not international.
Yeah. So that's the goal. Why it's September 30th is, in theory, that's podcasting's birthday. So yeah, I'm not sure how long Dave and Steve have been doing that. But
good guys, by the way. Good guys, very responsive too.
Yeah, very cool. So
international. What about
you? Well, first things first. Daniel mentioned this. Happy 10 years to John Lee Dumas.
Oh, nice.
He's just celebrated 10 years in podcasting, and congratulations to Jen Briney of Congressional Dish, who just got on CNN for the second time. So that was really cool. On the School of Podcasting, we are talking about, do you take actions on promos when you hear them? That's the question of the month. And then I've got Sunny Galt, who has a resource for people that are running networks. It's kind of a network mastermind group that she's running. So I have her on. We talk about podcast networks and what you can learn and things like that. But we will be here every Saturday, 10:30 Eastern at askthepodcastcoach.com/live. Thanks to the chat room. Thanks to everyone on Wisdom. And we will see you next Saturday.